Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Lehman with a little preview of our unit in American history on the Populists and the Progressives. This can be a little bit of an information-dense section, mainly because there are a lot of big things going on here, and there aren't necessarily dominant personalities who you can frame the period around, except for Teddy Roosevelt. And if you just focus on Teddy Roosevelt, then you end up losing a lot of what the Populists are doing, and you end up in the Northeast or wherever Roosevelt's hunting at the time, I guess. And so, what I want to emphasize is that these two ideas and concepts, populism and progressivism, have one thing in common. They're a response to the Industrial Revolution. Both are attempts to meet the challenges of a world that has changed extremely rapidly, where the way we live, the way we work, the way we raise our children has been impacted by technology, by the movement from farms to cities, and by changes in social relations that we're still feeling the effects of today. And so, kind of the short way of putting this is that the populists tend to want to preserve an existing way of life that they feel is threatened, whereas the progressives want to seize upon the changes of the Industrial Revolution and attempt to progress towards a world in which technological change has made society a better place. And that's an oversimplification in both cases. I mean, the populists aren't denying all the time the potential for technology. And the progressives aren't saying that you need to, end the use of farms, produce, livestock and crops. But it's a fairly good way of understanding them on a base level. So, the populists become a political party, a formal one, and as you can see if you look at, say, an election map of 1896, they get their most support from the West and from parts of the American South, but especially the West. They're going to have trouble breaking through the party politics of the time. And in the South, that also runs into racial politics. There'll be divisions within the populists about whether or not to appeal across racial lines to African American voters. And both white and African Americans who support populism will be up against the powers that be in the American South, who are large landowners, who, while they might be sympathetic to certain agrarian ideals, are also a little bit afraid of any challenge to their business interests or any economic policies that might favor small farmers over both businesses and larger landowners. So the populists end up being relegated to the West in a lot of ways, but their ideas become part of American rhetoric, and they put a premium on the ideal of the small farmer as an American institution. And you can see the kind of the traces of populism in some of American educational policy, but also in subsidies for farmers that become kind of a cornerstone of Americans' domestic economic programs, and a concern for rural life and its increasing transition towards the cities and the suburbs. For the progressives, Teddy Roosevelt's the figure who looms largest, but so does somebody like an H.L. Mencken or even a Mark Twain, or various industrial reformers, Upton Sinclair, author of The Jungle, that sort of thing. And the progressives are a little bit less easy to put in a box. There's not a progressive party, except for the time that Teddy Roosevelt comes back to run for a third term and unsuccessfully in the 1910s. But the attitudes of progressivism are heavily based in the idea of industrial reform, better working conditions, educational opportunities, recognizing that the modern workplace is changing. Although I have to say with progressivism, this doesn't mean that they always love things like labor unions. There's definitely folks who manage to identify themselves as progressives, but who still seem to think that those with wealth and the proper background, be that racial, class, religious even, are the ones who should be calling the shots and running the country. So there's a lot of different strains of progressivism, generally built around the idea of improving society through, curbing the excesses of the Industrial Revolution, creating a better space for workers. That doesn't necessarily mean they want the workers to be the main part of that process. And a lot of their policies will be adopted by elites or adopted by corporations and businesses themselves in order to make their workplace more efficient. Treating your workers better, lo and behold, as Henry Ford discovers, means your workers can buy more stuff, they have more stable lives, and they become more productive workers. Child labor laws, in addition to having the impact of helping children go to school and live longer and avoid terrible working conditions, they're also going to help adults find jobs. The adults won't compete against children for industrial jobs. And so, this is a good way of looking at the progressive era and the populists, is that you have two responses to the Industrial Revolution, one of which tries to hold on to the past, the other of which tries to embrace change. But both make compromises, and neither, especially the progressives, are a monolithic movement with a clear list of expectations and goals. Thank you very much, and I hope this helps you get started.